be seated.
Now we do something a little different this evening. We remember a man who died. So as the different items for tribute, which have been distributed already, as their name, we invite you to bring them forward as we remember Jesus the Christ, a man who lived an incredible life, who spoke to so many people, did so much good during his life. The first thing we remember about Jesus is that he was a teacher. We remember this with the scroll. He taught in the temple. We remember that Jesus, when he was just a little boy, was found in the temple. And the religious leaders, as they spoke with him, were awed at how he spoke at such a young age. And he continued that. He taught the people he encountered about God. We also remember that Jesus was a storyteller. We remember this with a couple of symbols. One is from the story of the prodigal son. A story where a son tells his father that he wants his inheritance early. He doesn't care if his father is still alive. He wants the money. And he goes and he squanders that money. When he has wasted it all, he comes back. A man who has totally squandered that fortune. And what does his father do? He wraps him in a robe, gives him his ring as a sign of love for his son. Another story, a very simple thing that the people would have encountered, the mustard seed. And Jesus, with this very simple symbol, says, the kingdom of God is like a mustard seed. It's so tiny, and yet when it's planted and grows, it's a very large bush, something that can support the animals. Something enormous springs from something so tiny. Jesus taught us about God's love and God's truth. And we have a symbol, the heart. When Jesus was asked, what is the greatest commandment? His response was, the greatest commandment is to love God and to love your neighbor as yourself. And so we remember that symbol with a heart. We remember that Jesus was one who stood for social justice. We remember these with a few pictures because Jesus cared for the poor. He cared for orphans and widows. We also bring some symbols, bread and clothing. This is how we care for people. This is what we do for them. When we believe in justice, we care for these people. So we bring these symbols forward. We remember that Jesus stood for social justice. We also remember from last night, we saw Jesus washing the disciples' feet. He was a servant. He took time to do something that was definitely beneath a master. And yet Jesus said clearly, the master is going to serve even the servants. So we remember that Jesus took these basic understandings of the world around us and he flipped it upside down. Even the master serves. He gave us an example of how to practice our faith, a man who never sinned, and yet he was baptized. He did it for our benefit. so that we would have that example for ourselves that we need to be baptized. He did it for the nation of Israel, so that that country, for all the guilt and blame that was on them, would be removed. It is an example for us today. There's also the Lord's Prayer, which we regularly share. Another example for us. How do you pray? Pray like this. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. That's what Jesus taught us. He was also a social activist. He turned over the tables in the church. Why? Because they were doing something wrong, and he chose to undo something that was being done that was wrong. He took a whip and he drove the animals out of the temple courtyard because they were being sold, and that the poor people were being charged more money than they should have. And he cleared out the temple, got rid of the people, and he said, this should be a house of prayer. He did what was right, even though it was against the standards of the culture around him. He did what was right. He was a social activist. Jesus healed body and soul. The symbols for this are a teddy bear and also a prayer shawl. Two symbols that are rich with meaning in our own church. He cured the sick. He raised the dead. He made those who were sick well. We also remember the Beatitudes in Matthew, words that bring many people comfort in the midst of difficult things in their life. And finally, Christ said, I am the light. So those with candles will come forward as we remember that Christ is the light.
Let us sing together. Tell me. Oh, I'm sorry. We shall overcome. 533.